Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to the Singularity Lab. I'm your co-host, Luis Jimenez. Welcome. Good morning. Hello. Good day. Good afternoon. Aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Singularity Lab, your one-stop shop. Let me read. For reliable news and commentary on breaking stories in science, technology, futurism, and UAP discoveries. Again, I'm Luis Jimenez. Joining me are my esteemed colleagues, Mr. and Mrs. Michael and Kristin Mataluni. Today we're going to be speaking with Bradley Voorhees from the Sonic Gravity podcast. We'll be discussing his theory of everything and UAP-related topics. But before we bring them in, I want to say hello to everyone in the chat. Let's see who we got here. Guys, if you're in here, like, share, subscribe. Let's see how many people we get in here for this live stream. This is going to be a fun discussion. Want to say hello. Let me go to the very top here. Ooh, Morg Ellen. It's probably AI from the future. Humans take for granted a completely faulty interpretation of time. Everything around us is a higher frequency mind than our own, regulated to a probability. That is some poetic stuff there, Morg Ellen. Where's that? Yep, Ellen. Thank you. But they continue. Something that is always overlooked with regard to wave-particle duality is the fact our perception is always about 80 milliseconds in the past due to our extremely low-frequency neural oscillations. You're just trying to prove if I can read. And I'm on it. Because they continue. It's back here at the subjective present where we collapse the probability function, not in the objective present. The objective present is the high frequency termination point of the EM spectrum. Damn. Look at this. You should be writing a book, not wasting your time in this chat, because this is good stuff. An AI with higher frequency neural processing would experience its own subjective present always a fraction of a second in our future, so cannot exist simultaneously with us, consciously. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to say hi to some other people, because Morg, you went wild. And I love it. It's good stuff. Hello, Kev D. Welcome. So what are you really saying here? It's a good question. It's a good question. I didn't read the rest of it, so to be fair, I don't know. But Morg has quite a bit of response. Let's say hello to Internet UFO Database. How's it going? Kev D, welcome you guys. It's going to be a fun conversation. Let's see who else we got in here. I thought I saw Tina Tamazuski. Alien Boca Face, there she is. Tina Tamazuski, our moderator. Thank you so much for being here. We've also got Artemis Prime in the chat somewhere. She's also our moderator. Should have put a poll up by now. Do we have a poll up? Let me see what the poll is. I haven't got a chance to read it. Okay, is Bradley ... a madman, a genius? Space-time will tell. That's our poll for the day, so we're going to be, I think, checking in on that in the first hour. But before we do all of this fun stuff, let's bring in our co-host, shall we? Mr. and Mrs. Michael and Kristin Mataluni. Hello, guys. How you doing?
What is up? What is up? It's great to see you all in the chat. It's great to see you, Luis, Kristin. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well, man. I can't complain. You know what I just realized? I forgot to open with your intro.
Oh, that's all right. We'll get it next time.
We'll get it next time.
You know what?
Sorry.
You know what? We're here. We're live. It's that's the most important thing, I think. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
I agree.
Dude, well, I can't wait for today's show. Sorry. I mean, I just, how I think of things and I just speak out loud. I think out loud, as sometimes people call that.
I do. We've got a pretty dope show for you guys today. So I'm really appreciative of everyone who's here, who's in the chat. We're going to get right into our main guest in a second. But in the second hour, and I hope he can stick around for the second hour because we got some fun, interesting breaking science, breaking technology to discuss. Some interesting things going on with fusion power. But I wanted to run this by you guys. I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Freakonomics Radio, the other day, and we were talking about climate change. They were talking about alternative energy sources. And we'll be talking about fusion a little later today. But one of the interesting things that they were talking about was this idea that there are basically two camps when it comes to climate change. One is it's kind of a metaphor. One is the prophet, and the prophet is the person who comes and says, we're killing our planet, we're shitting in our own backyard, we're destroying the earth, and planet Earth is not gonna have it, and just gonna shake us like fleas. Those are the prophets. And then there's the wizards, who are the people who believe technology will save us, innovation will save us, we'll think our way out of it. So I was curious, Kristin, we'll start with you. Are you a prophet or a wizard?
And with George, we're doomed.
So it's not even you're an angry prophet.
While you can be grateful for the experience that you're getting to experience, but like it's not going to be long lived. Don't have kids.
Wow. But what, don't you worry for your children then?
I'm telling them not to have kids.
Wow.
She's an angry prophet, bro.
Interesting.
Angry
what
prophet.
If you're wrong, though? Yeah, I mean, you don't think you're wrong, huh? You're that absolute about it?
Well, if I'm wrong, the worst thing we have to worry about is how to take care of our elderly population, which I think is not a very difficult problem to solve. So
no, neither is taking care of our veterans or
true.
The homeless.
True. But when the majority of the population becomes the elderly, then we'll work a little harder on it, I think.
Well, it was like that for a long time. I mean, basically, the World War I and II generation is almost gone completely, and the baby boomers are starting to fall out. And those, I don't think I think they'll have. This is like their last gasp of an election choice, and it's pretty much the next generation is going to be determining what's going to happen from that standpoint. But I mean, here's the issue though, Mike. And it's the issue that we have, I think, with a lot of things. We broke it down into only two things. It could only be one of these two things, right? And are
you about to break into a two-party system rant?
No, man. No, I'm not.
It's okay if you are.
But it's an issue, right? Like it's an issue. It's a lack of choice. Like there can't be just two solutions to a problem.
I agree.
My point. Like
I completely agree.
Like this idea again. I think we were talking about this the other day. Like, isn't it just the right thing to do? Like, not to pollute if you're a company, not to destroy, and not replace what you took. Is it not incumbent upon us as humans to be like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be fishing as much as we do, or but that gets into a whole nother mess of things, because like, who the hell are we to tell another country's culture and religions
exactly
how to fish?
But I definitely believe in making an effort, like even if we're doomed. But I don't think we should tell other countries what to do.
Well, this is why I love the UAP topic, dude, because if this is real, all of those things go away. In my opinion.
Away?
I think they come real damn close to it. If you get something like Reagan said in the UN, if we had an existential threat from an extraterrestrial civilization, all of that bullshit would go out the window.
Well, we would certainly, Reagan said we would come together and unite in a way we've never united before, but I'm not sure that fixes pollution. I'm not sure that fixes.
But let's say we win, right? And there's this post now, like what's left of society mixed with this new alien society's technology. And now we start thinking in a different mindset. I would think.
Have you not watched the MCU? Did you not see what happened?
Well, I also watched Independence Day, which is a pretty good historical depiction of what might happen.
Yeah, as future history.
Isn't it like the first contact sort of thing in Star Trek? Where
I don't know.
Like,
I mean, I think in Star Trek the idea was
remarkably unlikely.
Yeah, well, but in the first contact idea that you're commingling with another civilization, and so and you're post scarcity too, right? You have the replicator. You live in an egalitarian society. You're post capitalism. So I don't know.
So what we need is a replicator to to replicate a whole cove of dolphins for these men to slaughter every year in like this,
I think
ritualistic thing.
Jazz's ears are bleeding right now as you talk about slaughtering dolphins.
There's history and there's like economics involved, so it's a long.
Yeah, it's a big story. And to your point, Luis, it is a big story, and there aren't two answers. But are you a wizard or are you a prophet? What do you think? If you had to pick one, what would you be?
I think I'd go. Oh man, it's tough. I'd probably go wizard.
Yeah? You think innovation and technology can save us?
I do, because we always think, every generation always thinks that we're at the end.
Right.
Like everything is about to collapse. Go ask your great grandfather what he thought when the world was really collapsing around him.
They had bomb shelters.
They had bomb. They had bomb practice sessions in Miami. During the Cuban Missile Crisis. Like really, like this close to ending the world. In a second. And here we are. We're talking about and these are threats. These are things that I think we should definitely be putting on the front burner. But there's always a really smart innovator. Person, mind, whoever that he or she is, and they change the world with one gadget. Like, can you imagine if somebody developed, I don't know, like a building that can suck all the carbon monoxide out of the sky and turn it into oxygen?
Well, and this is what Robert Diamandis and Elon Musk, they're putting up cash to see who can come up with the CO2 sucker.
I think it's going to happen.
Better than
like
space.
I will never doubt human ingenuity and know-how. That's why I never doubt that these things in the sky that we see, these UAP, aren't human-made. Wouldn't shock me. Would not shock me. And yes, it wouldn't shock me if they discovered it in the 50s. Would not shock me at all. Because, I mean, that's a technology. Let's say you found it in the 50s. Let's say you figured it out by 1960. Let's just propose this for a second. Society isn't ready for that technology to just be thrown into it. Right? Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right.
I mean, like Kaku says that the matter maker that we'll have by the time we're a first type 1 civilization, where you'll be able to, you got a microwave size thing that you can football and boom, it cooks a football, but you can't just throw that into society. Like, we'll have the tech in 20 years, but you won't see it in your living room for 100.
That's interesting. I definitely think I'm a wizard also. I believe that technology and innovation will save us, and we can move into, type 1, type 2, those elevated civilizations that don't destroy themselves. So,
I think we can do it.
I think we can do it too.
The thing I was going to mention, though, is that they were right about the bombs back in the 50s. I mean, today, anybody can punch in coordinates on a sub and like freaking nuke another country. So it's kind of remarkable that we've existed for this long.
It is.
Without a doubt.
It is.
Without a doubt. Well, here's what's scarier, right? And just going back to, and this is what we call bringing it full circle. Going back to your, how do we take care of the elderly issue, right? We still have a nuclear weapon making program. Somebody's still learning how to make splitting an atom even more destructive than it was last year.
Right.
Like and to think that it's coming from the most highly advanced, technologically powerful human force to ever exist in human history, as far as we know. And we still are trying to make bigger and better bombs. There's a budget for that.
Yeah.
Like you could stop making nuclear bombs. I'm not saying nuclear tech, scrap the whole thing. I'm just saying the bomb aspect, like, do we really need to be working on that? Like, we need to be devoting resources and time and brilliant minds to doing that.
I mean, no. The answer is no.
Like, those are the discussions that I think our generation are going to start having once they take over Congress and the Senate. I hope those are the conversations they start having. We'll see. The beautiful thing about, say, a polar or a lightning rod like Trump it was, is that he inspired a lot of progressive, young, smart, new minds to run for office. like that's a good thing. I'll take that positive out of that craziness. Like that's a good thing. You won't feel the impact of it for 15 or 20 years, but that's how politics works.
Yeah, it's slow. It's slow moving.
Slow.
So I just wanted to kind of bring it back full circle when we're talking about, wizards. Maybe we have one here in the studio. I don't know.
We do. I'm sorry. That was such a great question though.
That's what we're gonna do more of these. We're gonna open the show with more of these deep questions to ponder. But right now, I'm extremely excited. We've got Bradley Voorhees. He's the creator of Sonic Gravity podcast and a self-proclaimed madman. Bradley is a retired military officer, an engineer, a lawyer, father and husband, considers himself an objectivist observing the universe. He also believes he has unraveled the God equation, or as some might know it, the theory of everything. Welcome, Bradley.
Oh, hey, Michael. Thanks for having me. It's really an honor to be on your show and share this space with you.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to have you. And it was funny. We were chatting before the show, and as we were promoting the podcast today, Bradley mused with me and said he was surprised he didn't get more hate on Twitter. There's nothing like saying you've solved the God equation to really piss some people off. So, Bradley, tell us before we get into what you want to share with us today. I'm curious how you got into podcasting, how you got into physics, UAPs. Like what kind of inspired you to get into all this?
Well, it's not actually a physics podcast. I maybe 8 or 9 months ago, the place where I work had a formal mentorship program, and so my mentee was a young man, post-millennial, and we hit it off so well, and it was such a mutually beneficial acquaintance that he told me, he's like, you know what, you really need the podcast. You need to bottle this stuff because there are a lot of people I think that could really use it, because I guess I made a positive, significant difference in his life, and so. I didn't even know really what podcasting was. And so I just looked it up on YouTube, and I, looked on Facebook and found, this Outfit Podfest that is kind of like a nurturing sort of petri dish for people's podcasts. And then I just started ugly, and I just started making podcasts. And, like if you listen to my earlier ones, they're pretty raw. I mean, I think the content's good, but and I'm not polished by any means. I mean, you guys are ultra pro. Mine aren't anything. It's just me talking. So I'm still a work in progress. I'm on the potter's wheel, so to speak. But it's getting better, and I'm really enjoying it. And I think the second part of your question was, how did you get into physics and things like that? Well, I'm an engineer, right? Civil engineer. And I got a bachelor's, and I was dating a cheerleader when I was at school. And so I stuck around and got a master's. So I picked up a little bit extra when I was there, but sort of. Anyway, so I did have some physics. I've had a third order differential equation, or like multiple order differential equations. I have some exposure to the math. So at least I can sort of see what's going on. I don't think I could come up with an eigen vector matrix or anything like that, but so. I have some physics background, and whenever I get something in my head, like I see these UAPs and I'm like, man, I got to figure out how they fly. If I can't tell, it's just like this splinter in my mind, and it's a character flaw, and I just can't stop thinking about it. And of course I'm bipolar. And so when I start thinking about something that I can't figure out, my brain just starts spinning. And I probably was spinning for 3 months trying to sort out how these UAPs are flying around. And I think I finally figured it out a few weeks ago. And just in the process, I think I was so amped up and so manic and spinning that I just accidentally sort of figured out everything in theoretical physics. So I didn't even mean to. And Lewis, if you want to like get a piece of those UAPs and sort of at least see what I think, I did a bunch of episodes called Critical Thinking. It's like 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, no, 7, and then 10, 11, 12. And then I did one thing as a print. So if you want to check it out, like I really kind of go through it, teach quantum physics and stuff. I've been teaching myself quantum physics for like 3 months.
Wow.
And so that's kind of how I came up with that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to go back and check that out.
It's really cool. It's fun.
Yeah, so I'm sure there are just so many people who just are so angry with this idea that you've taken, you spent 3 months studying quantum physics and you figured out that you believe you figured out the God equation. So let's dig in here. So let's get to the meat of it. What is the sonic gravity theory of everything, the God equation? Can you actually, first of all, can you explain to people what the theory of everything is, what the God equation is, and then we'll get into your theory?
Well, I didn't even appreciate exactly what the God equation meant until I figured out what dark matter was, and then I plugged it in, and then it essentially just modifies E equals mc squared, but it gives you the value of this energy, and then you can start plugging it in other places, and things just kind of unpack it. There's so much that just sort of reveals itself all at once. And the other thing that was really interesting that made it the God equation sort of in my mind is after you get kind of done, once you hear the sonic gravity theory of everything, you'll actually recognize the potential for the geometry of the universe that supports the notion that's plausible of the location of heaven and hell. And so in some ways it's very spiritual, because if you accept some of the premises, like we're actually living on the surface of a black hole, recording, we're like sort of the librarians of the universe. There's a law called the law of conservation of information, and we conserve information. We register it in our memory and in our DNA. And Stephen Hawking and Gerard Atuf and all these brilliant physicists went round and round and round talking about how quantum, or sort of Hawking radiation, they thought it was temperature, but I don't think it's temperature. I think it's time. And I think we remember it and record it. So in a lot of ways, it really puts a lot of different things together. And if I start from the beginning, it make a whole lot more sense.
Yeah, let's start from the beginning.
Yeah.
So let me set the stage here quickly. So for those folks who don't know the theory of everything, so basically we have two types of physics. We have quantum mechanics and we have classic Newtonian physics. Classic Newtonian physics pretty much explains everything we experience here on Earth. Newton has several immutable laws, really. But once we start investigating the quantum realm, Newtonian physics begins to break down. And so there's no bridge. There's nothing that connects those two types of physics as we know it. Bradley believes he has some answers for us. So maybe you can, from there, you can start from the beginning.
Sure. Okay. So let's think about quantum physics just in the abstract. So I want you to think about your TV, and your TV has a bunch of little pixels in it, right? And inside every pixel, there's like 3 color elements: red, blue, and green. And so when you look at your picture and you superimpose red, blue, and green, you get your HD picture where you can see everything. Now think about inside each pixel, turn off the green and the blue, right? So you're only left with the red. That red, you're looking at your TV, it's just a field of red. That's like a quantum field. That's quantum field theory. And so you could turn off the red and you just have the blue. You could turn off the red and blue, you just have the green. But when you superimpose them, that's when you get your full HD, beautiful picture on your TV. Now, reality is kind of the same way, except instead of 3 quantum fields, red, blue, and green, you have 17 quantum fields. 5 of them are force. You got the weak nuclear force, the strong nuclear force, electromagnetism, and you got the Higgs field. Anyway, you have all these different kinds of forces, and then you have like 12 particle fields, like electrons and stuff like that. So one of those fields is the Higgs field. And the interesting thing about the Higgs field is that it doesn't oscillate. It's the only field, essentially. You can also think of them as strings, right? If you think of a blanket, like wherever they tie in a knot, that's like an atom, and there's like 17 strings going to it. So you can think of them as fields, you can think of them as strings, You can think of them as particles in atoms. You can kind of idealize it any way you feel like. It doesn't really matter. So if you think of them as strings tied in a knot, the Higgs string just goes straight. And the other particles kind of zip around in a circle. And I'm thinking about in the UFO context, I'm thinking about how can we, because I think they fly massless. The Higgs field is generally thought of to be the field that gives mass to the other particles. And so
the Higgs field, it gives mass to other particles. Okay. And Does that have to do with it not vibrating in the same way the other fields or the other forces?
Well, kind of, because what happens is the Higgs field is straight and the rest of the particles, I think, are attached to the Higgs field. Now, imagine a string that's straight, the Higgs string, and there's a Planck length, one Planck length distance the Higgs field can stretch. That's the smallest distance.
Imagine a particle. Planck is the smallest unit of measurement of time. Is that correct?
Time, distance, and mass. Yep.
Okay.
And so imagine all the particles in the universe kind of on a corkscrew, right? With the Higgs field going through the middle. Now the particle can go one Planck length to the left or one to the right. It's not a big deal. It won't stretch the Higgs field. You go two, you're pulling on the Higgs field, and the Higgs field will jerk you back. And so what gives them
now
mass
is this part of your theory, or is this proven theoretically previously by other physicists?
This is my hypothesis.
This is your hypothesis. Okay.
That I started with, and then it kind of all fell into place.
Okay.
And so what you have is essentially a range of two Planck lengths that a particle can go. Then it gets jerked back, and it can go back and forth. It goes back and forth. But it doesn't just kind of go back and forth. It goes in a circle. But it goes in a circle with a 4 Planck length diameter. And so when you take the geometry, and this is all classic general relativity. Like I'm talking about quantum stuff, but I'm using the geometry of just like plain old physics. And so the orbit of that the orbit of those particles goes in a 4 Planck length diameter circle.
Okay.
And the circumference of a circle like that is 4 pi, right? Planck lengths, which is about 12. Now, what I realized was that, from some previous geniuses in physics, there's Jacob Bekenstein, who figured out this entropy problem with black holes. And he was talking about you can model a black hole as a 2D surface, and then he could solve this entropy problem. And so what I sort of started to see was that, hey, maybe we're on a 2D hologram. And, that is also stuff that Stephen Hawking and Gerard de Tooth talked about. Maybe we're on a 2D hologram, and that hologram is bent around in a circle, like in an orb, and it's encoding a 3D universe, because Gerard de Tooth proved that you could encode a 3D universe on the surface of a 2D hologram. And so if you think now, say you're looking down the surface of your hologram, you're looking like this, and it's a Planck length thick, so you got two thicknesses on either side. And if the particles are going around the thickness of that Planck length, the thickness of that, or the radius, the circumference of the 4 pi circumference, and it goes through 2 Planck lengths, then you're actually, if you're plugged into this hologram and all you can see is the hologram, you're only going to detect where the particle crosses that hologram in 2 places, in those 2 Planck lengths. And so
is this the idea of particles moving in and out of existence, or anti-particles and antimatter? Is this related?
No, not that I'm aware of. I'm not talking about any kind of antimatter.
Okay.
But if you're on the surface essentially of this black hole, and the orbit of these particles are going around, if you can only see them when you're plugged into this hologram, in each of 2 times in a cycle when they hit the Planck length, essentially what you have is a ratio of 12.5, which is 4 times pi Planck lengths. It's 12.5, and then you have 2 Planck lengths of range where you can see that matter. What you get is a ratio of 5 0.25 of dark matter when it's outside the thickness of the hologram, and that's exactly the ratio of dark matter to visible matter. And so that's how that kind of piece works. And there were some other things that I put in the podcast, other indicia that we were actually on a 2D hologram, because quantum teleportation, like if you imagine you can only see the hologram, you're sitting on a hologram in 2D, and you can only see what hits that hologram. If you imagine like one of those old school notebooks, right, where there's that bendy sort of silver spiral that goes through each one. If the hologram is flat and that's all you can see, and imagine a BB, like a particle, rolling along that spring. You can't see the spring, but everywhere where it hits the surface
the
of
surface,
that paper,
we gain
like
visibility. So is this the idea of what we see as a wave collapsing into a particle?
Okay, well, when you talk about wave collapsing, okay, so that's got a lot to do with sort of quantum sort of probability density that something's going to be there. And I don't need any of that. I don't use any of that, because all I'm using, because then I would be playing the quantum physics game, and I'm not playing that quantum physics game. I'm sticking with basic, general relativity and just kind of like basic physics, talking about modeling what we see when it's quantum teleportation. It's not some kind of superpositioned probability density where the wave function collapses when we look at it, because you need that if you think that it's random. It's not random. It's just that you can't see it. You can't see the spiral that your particle is passing through. And
so this kind of replaces the wave function needing to collapse. It's just, it only appears that there's a wave function collapsing. What it really is just coming into view. Is that the idea?
The Rosetta Stone of this concept, this theory of everything, the Rosetta Stone of it is the sort of black hole existence where we're sitting on this hologram. And that, I didn't make that up. That came from, well, at least in my mind, it came from the work of Dr. Bekenstein, Dr. DeToof, Dr. Hawking. And so I was just, looking at things, and I thought, and that's kind of the weird thing that goes on when I get really, really manic. I remember everything I learn. And so everything just kind of comes together all at once. And like, I won't even be thinking about general relativity or I won't even be thinking about theoretical physics. And all of a sudden a thought will assemble and I'll be like, oh man, we're on a black hole. And so, but let me get a little bit past that. So that explains quantum teleportation, right? And so when you think about, I want you to think about a supernova, because that's when we start getting into the origin of the universe. Mm-hmm. And so we know what dark matter is. Dark matter is when that thing on the spiral, when it's not crossing the thickness of our hologram, when we're not picking it up, that's what dark matter is. And so essentially, and because, it's the Higgs string, right, that's kind of holding that orbit together, the Higgs string is really sort of the time string, because the Higgs string won't let it go 2 Planck lengths. It will only let it go 2 Planck lengths of distance or 2 Planck lengths of time. And so really what you have is 100% of our mass sloshing around in a range of 4 Planck lengths of time. And we really only can perceive the amount of matter that's like hitting our hologram in our Planck length of time. And so you really only see 18% of your matter at once, and you can't interact with all of it, except the gravity is still there. It's still there. We just can't see it and interact with it. And so, but when you think about, I want you to think about a supernova. Core of a star starts making iron, and then the energy of starts stealing electrons from the plasma of the star. The star smashes down on that core, right? And I don't think that a black hole is a big, stinky, mass of heavy stuff, okay? A black hole has nothing to do with mass. The black hole collapses down and punches the core of that star through space-time.
Ooh,
it goes into a void. It goes into a void outside of space-time. And if you look at the equation of
So let me ask you this real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
All right. So the classic interpretation of a black hole is, as you said, a supernova. A star collapses in on itself, and it's just the most extraordinary mass, and that mass is pulling the rest of the galaxy around it through the forces of gravity. But when we study a black hole, we have an event horizon. And that's the point at which light cannot escape. Right. And when you go into the black hole, all mathematics breaks down, and it's called a singularity, because a singularity is a point at which math no longer works. It purely does not work. And so what you're saying, the explanation for that is that mass ripped a hole through space-time. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. And the math works perfectly. And let me tell you how. So now remember, the mass equation, right, that I derived for you is 4 pi.
I'm so sorry, Bradley, but this is great. MP says, can we make Luis's puzzled face into an emote?
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's what I was thinking, right? As I was saying, like,
thank you, MP.
The thing that is popping into my brain, just to sort of wrap my head around what you're talking about, because I know shit about physics. I know nothing about this stuff. But I'm trying to make sense of it, and I'm trying to use your analogies to do that. In my brain, I'm picturing a blender that I can only see parts of that are blending. Right. And that the whole is this force that's, I guess you said punching through, but it feels like it might be pulling through.
Right. Now, this is a separate discussion from what we were talking about before with the spiral and the particles in the dark matter.
Right.
However, the mass of that core of that star is 6.25 times more than we think it is. So it's a lot more massive than we think. Now, the black hole at the center of our galaxy, Sagittarius A star, is the black hole that the whole galaxy is spinning around. But this can go for any star, like whether or not it's like the center of a galaxy or not. When a star supernovas and it crashes down, what it does, I think, in the sonic gravity theory of everything, is it punches that core through the fabric of space-time. And in the equation, it's 4 pi divided by the G factor, including the anomalous dipole moment, which we don't really need to get into, times the observable mass. And so essentially all this does is take all the mass on the hoop and put it in for m in Einstein's equation, and then times the speed of light squared. That's energy, because everybody thinks E equals mc squared, and that's true. But E equals m, including the dark matter we can't see that is spinning around outside of the hologram, right? It's all the matter on the hoop, not just the stuff we can see in the thickness of the hologram. And so all of that mass, remember that new term in the front of the E equals mc squared, it's divided by the G factor.
What is the G factor? Is that gravity, or what's the G factor?
No, the G factor is what you get when there's a Einstein. Anyway, Einstein and one other guy, Gerlach. Einstein and Gerlach came up with this essentially the spin of the atoms, trying to tell what the dipole moment is. Essentially, what kind of spin do atoms and these particles confer on matter. And the thing is that when we model it in quantum mechanics, right, we're thinking of like kind of an electron spinning around, and it's like one moment arm. And so they're like, well, we can't get it to match up to the classical physics answer. And the classical physics answer is always double what the quantum physics answer is. And so they just came up with this fudge factor of 2. And they multiplied it by 2. And that was, they just called that the G factor. But the actual reason in just, when you unify physics, is there's actually 2 impulses, because it goes through one side of because in every cycle it hits that the sides, it goes through the hologram twice. And so if you model it like I'm talking about with the hologram, then you get 2 impulses. So you don't need a G factor really. It's you're hitting the thickness of the black hole twice. And so it even solves that G factor dipole moment business. And there's a little teeny extra they call the anomalous dipole moment, because it's not just two, it's like two and a little change. And in sort of my perception of the whole, black hole, living on the surface of a black hole, the reason it's a little bit more than two is because the black hole isn't flat. It's kind of curved. So there's like a refractory mass. There's like, it goes a little bit extra when it has to go through the curve. And I think that's also considered like a form of entanglement. Essentially, the rest of the universe is kind of grabbing or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think what you have is you're going through a curved surface. And so it's not just two Planck lengths, it's 2.0011614 and like some other change. And so, but that is attributable to the existence of a universe and the circumference of a black hole. Now, when you punch that core all the way through space and time, there's nothing there. There's no black hole. There's no anomalous dipole moment. And so now your mass equation is divided by 0. And so
which is impossible, which is a singularity,
which
right?
is infinite,
Right.
infinite. And that means the geometry of your, essentially the core, the seed of your universe is 0. And that is a singularity. And that is why the math works when you have your mass equal to 4 pi over the g factor times the observable mass times e squared or c squared. And so it punches through this hole, and now you have a singularity of pure, like, well, it's actually it's a singularity, but it's actually the core of that star. But the thing is, and this is beautiful, this is why it's like a baby, because inside that star, inside the seed of that universe, is all the DNA that you need for a universe. There's space-time inside that star, inside the core of that star. There's all of the forces, there's all of the elements. The DNA of the universe is inside that seed. And here's the thing, what rips it open, right? What rips open that singularity is, I think, if you think of like the hole that is punched in space-time, there's like, imagine a hole, but there's like still Higgs strings all around the outside, right? That are still entangled with that seed that's somewhere out of space-time. And so I think the Higgs field kind of jerks on that seed a little bit, jerks on that singularity and cracks it open. And there are a lot of like sort of papers that say people think that the Higgs field is what's responsible for ripping open the singularity. And I agree with them. And so then when the singularity is shredded inside this kind of universe where there's no space, there's no nothing, then the weak nuclear force, and weak nuclear force is like osmosis. That's the way I sort of understand it. And what it tries to do is kind of smear everything out so it's even, to achieve what they call a high level of entropy. And that's just like, there's nothing special about any other kind of space. It's all kind of the same. But now you have an infinitesimally small amount of like just infinite mass, so to speak. And once the Higgs string tugs at it and cracks it, man, the weak nuclear force goes in there and says, I have a complete, like, I have an eternity of space and nothing in it, So,
and it's trying to even it out.
Force eradicates everything. It just turns it into pure energy. And then the space inflates as the weak nuclear force drags all of that energy out, like at twice the speed of light. And so now you have a situation where I'm just using plain old like 11th grade physics to explain all these quantum processes, right? So like I haven't talked anything about superposition or like any of these other kind of weird quantum sort of constructions that we make.
Is that because you believe that the state of understanding of quantum physics is just incomplete, that we could actually use Newtonian physics if we understand the big picture?
It is all Newtonian physics. It's just that what we lacked was we have the ability to perceive and process what's going on, I think, at the quantum level, but we lacked the Rosetta Stone. We weren't seeing it like it was us on the surface. And think about it, like in order for this to be true, right? we are sitting, our energy is all sitting on the surface of a black hole, right? And that's where all our particles are moving. That's where we're getting our information as human beings. And you can call it a spirit or a vibe or a soul or whatever you want. But that's where we're at. And we're quantumly entangled with matter that's encoded on the surface of this black hole that is in the middle of this universe, right? And that's why we're seeing things like glitches in the matrix, like quantum teleportation and some other things. And we're seeing them because that's how we're perceiving. That's the imprecision in perceiving a 3D universe through a 2D hologram.
Lens.
And so the things that are confusing us, like quantum teleportation, things like that, it makes perfect sense. It's because we don't have the Rosetta Stone. The geometry of our perception is inaccurate if we think we're just kind of sitting here watching things go around. We're actually on the surface of a black hole. And we are essentially, and you think about it, our memories, our DNA is recording history, right? And that's why, and I'm going to get to this and it's going to blow your mind in a second. We're recording the flow of time on the surface of this black hole. And Hawking radiation isn't heat, it's time. And so what I want you to do is
wait. This is all so good. All right, so Hawking radiation. Let me make sure people know what that is. Okay, so a black hole, once you hit the event horizon, the edge of the black hole, light cannot escape the event horizon. It just can't. But we have this weird radiation called Hawking radiation that allows you to, and somebody asked this in the chat earlier, can't we see light from a black hole? The whole idea is that you shouldn't be able to see light coming from black hole, but we can see Hawking radiation. So can you explain your what you think about that?
Okay, so just the geometry of a black hole is very, very different according to the sonic gravity theory of everything. So if I can just rewind it back, I will get right to that question.
Okay.
So the seed of that universe punches through space-time. It's in the void. It explodes and goes, but there is still quantum entanglement. There is still the Higgs field that, around that kind of ripped hole where the space-time ripped, and it's still quantumly entangled with everything that seed was. And so what you have is you have, and if you listen to Critical Thinking Part 7, UFOs, UAPs, and the Key to Immortality, I prove.
That's some hella SEO, bro.
Yeah. So but I mean, because it's kind of the longer explanation, it's like, really check it out. Because the thing is, as you move through the curvature of time, that's what causes gravity. And the illustration that I used in that was, when you hit your gas in the car, right? You take off and you feel the gravity, you feel the force push you into the back of your seat. And the reason is because when you move through space, the faster you move through space, the slower you move through time. You don't go slower, you age slower. And
right. And that's GR. Right. And that's also the theory of relativity, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
real quick, and we're going to get back to this, and we're not going to miss a beat. We're going to get through this whole thing. But Christina had a quick question with a $5 donation. Thank you so much, Christina, for supporting the show. Could black holes give rise between the event horizon and the singularity to conduits into the bulk, then opening access to other dimensions?
I'm not sure about the bulk, but I think that's exactly what it is. I think the black hole, just like you said, is the black hole is a scab as far as I'm on of space-time, because what happens is when that star punches through, there's a hole there. You got old space up here. You got brand new space in the new dimension, and the curvature of time between this super old space and this super new space, right, is the source of the gravity. Because I think tension in the Higgs string, the same way when your little particle jumps like one plank, it's gonna, like, the Higgs field is gonna pull it back. Well, now imagine the insanity of the force and gravity between 14 billion year old space and brand spanking new fresh space.
Baby
and
space.
That is the gravity of the black hole. And the reason that there's like an accretion disk and all that kind of stuff, as far as I'm concerned, and the reason that time stops at the surface or at the event horizon is because I don't believe that the parent space that's 14 billion years old and the brand new space, which is the surface of the black hole, I don't think those spaces are contiguous. I think you hit the end of space-time. I think you hit the edge of space-time. You're pulled into the you're pulled to the surface of the black hole, but you can't get in the black hole because that space is not connected. And so, and I think
interesting.
I think the gravity of the black hole is what is essentially, it's a scab. It's what's holding space-time together, keeping it from continuing to rip. And so the reason you have these crazy accretion disks is because there's all this pressure and, you know, all these gases and all that kind of stuff. And they just can't get any closer because they can't enter that space that is younger than the old space. And so they swirl around and they shoot out like pulsars because there's just no more, you just can't cram any more in there. And so I think what you have is essentially you have this baby universe, right? Way down here at the bottom in time. And then you have this Einstein-Rosen bridge that links those two, the old parent universe and the space of the baby universe. And remember, around that event horizon, time stops for the older universe, but it doesn't stop for the baby universe. And I think the baby universe catches up with age to the older universe. And then when the space-time is the same age, I think the space-time heals. I think the space in the baby universe reunites because it becomes in the same time as the old universe, as the parent universe. And now you have a baby universe with a bunch of like crumpled up space, and it shoves out, it elbows out, you know, rudely. And that is what dark energy is. Dark energy is the unfolding of the baby universe as it kind of elbows out for room. Does that make sense?
That's fucking wild.
Okay,
I mean, I'm piecing it together. Before
Yeah.
we get to Luis's question, can we real quick? I want to hit MP. Thank you so much for supporting the show, MP. You are the man. Does Bradley's theory have an explanation as to what is on the other side of space-time if a black hole can punch through it? Another dimension, the warp with sentient emotions spawned demons. Great show. Thanks, MP. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's absolutely time. It's a different dimension of time because I really believe because take it this way. There's a couple reasons. You know, we talked about tension in the Higgs string between the rip in the sort of borders of time and the seed, right? I think I heard Dr. Michikaku. I've only been studying this for like 3 months, but Dr. Michikaku one time he said, I know he said one time that if you like integrate that Higgs like wave equation or something over time, you get the formula for a graviton. And so the tension in the Higgs field between the baby universe and the parent universe is the source of the gravity of the black hole. And so it's got nothing to do with a bunch of matter or anything like that. It's quantum gravity. It is the tension in the Higgs string. And I think when you talk about inertial gravity, right? Force equals mass times acceleration. That is really, remember, as you move through space, the faster you move through space, the slower you move through time, and the passing through the curvature of time causes gravity. So I think force times acceleration is just, we're modeling quantum gravity because it's the Higgs field. Remember, we're sitting on the surface of that black hole, right? And there's time flowing up out of the black hole. The future is deeper in the black hole, and the past is behind us. It's already flown through us, right?
And you think that Hawking radiation is that time escaping the black hole?
Time. It's history.
Wow.
And
what
that's why
the
we're
fuck?
recording. It's not heat. It's
so
time.
the black hole isn't a scab; it's a picked scab.
Well,
that's oozing. It's I feel like oozing time instead of blood.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you're right. It is a perforated scab. You're exactly right because it's a hologram.
So
it changes.
Is it a space where it's being stretched too thin and so it rips?
You mean
Well,
the black hole?
the supernova punched through space-time, and then the black hole is the he's saying the black hole is the scab over that keeps the entire universe from bleeding out
bleeding out time.
Yeah.
Let's thank Jean-Francois
Charlebois.
Charlebois.
It's a beautifully rhymey name.
Thank you for the by the way, he bought a ton of merch yesterday. Thank you, Jean-Francois.
Oh yeah, we got the merch. We'll talk about merch here in a minute.
Let me tell you, this is totally a Flowers for Algernon situation. Like when I was manic, because that's, I think, part of the manifestation of my bipolar, sort of, I don't know, mental illnesses. When I get manic, I spin up and I get like crazy smarter than normally. And as I was doing this, I could feel myself getting dumber. And I was like, God, I better hurry up and write this down before I like forget. And so like now I'm just kind of like, I don't know, just being like kind of going over it in my head. And I wrote it down, put it in a podcast and all that stuff. So man, like, and I mean, if you really marinate on it, you start coming up with some crazy ideas. Like, universes, this is DNA. Universes could be evolutionary because of,
could be almost organic.
And when you think about it, if the DNA is in the core of the star, the weak nuclear force rips it into pure energy, but the DNA is still kind of there, then you can't get away from the idea that energy contains DNA. And then when you realize that our kind of idea is that we're on the surface of this black hole, we're energy on the surface of this black hole. If energy has DNA, then it makes sense that our projection of the 3D universe from the surface of the black hole has DNA too. So energy, there is DNA to energy, plausibly. And if there's DNA to energy, then there's nothing that says if we didn't reduce ourselves to energy, we couldn't like beam ourselves somewhere and then cool off and be there because our DNA is contained in the energy. I mean, like,
I'm having so much fun. This is like my favorite conversation ever.
Real quick before you define this, you didn't read Jean-Francois' comment.
Oh, I didn't. So he says, Jean-Francois, Kristin? Charlebois. Picking up the pieces from my blown away ignoramus mind. I'm right there with you, Jean-Francois Charlebois.
That's good.
Thank you. Before moving on, because I want to dig deeper into this, and then we're going to bring in our guests or our panel here in a second. But Jazz Shaw, thank you so much for the donation, Jazz. It means the world to me. Donated $50 and asks you how you would define how Hawking radiation works. Maybe you could give us the classical interpretation as you know it and your interpretation as well.
Well, I got to be honest with you. If I didn't need it to unravel all this, I didn't learn it. And so I know that Hawking radiation is about loss of information and I think heat. But the way I see Hawking radiation working is that it's time, it's history, it's the passage of time in the universe that's encoded in the black hole. And in order to preserve the conservation of information, which is, the law that says information cannot be
created or destroyed, right?
Essentially, I'm thinking, okay, well, smart guy, how is that going to ever be remembered? And then I thought, I got a memory, you got a memory, we got DNA, so maybe it's us on the surface of a black hole, and Hawking radiation is just time and history, and we're recording it in our memories and our DNA as it passes. And as that time passes, the baby universe is aging. And I think, like I said before, time is relative, but age is absolute. And as soon as that time pushes essentially out of that blowhole, which is the black hole, then the black hole will no longer be necessary. It evaporates over that time. And as it evaporates, the space-time that's contained in that baby universe elbows out. And that's what dark energy is. So Does that make sense?
So what a black hole, so if we're riding on the surface of this black hole and this radiation is us recording space, literally time coming out of it, right? God, I forgot my question because this is such a crazy concept for me to really wrap my brain around. Okay, so what happens to us when the black hole ceases to exist?
No, I'm glad you asked that question.
Does it dry up? You know, like, do we filter that as an asteroid hitting the planet, or do we filter that as an alien invasion? Like what? And if so, doesn't that speak to some sort of creator? Like it almost feels like it's like a pick your ending kind of game, you know, like except it's like a random wheel that we spin, and then whatever it stops on, it's like, oh, okay, black hole's over. These guys experience tsunamis, you know, or the planet explodes, or the moon stops turning, or whatever it is.
Yeah. So I mean, and Jazz is right. That's not what Hawking says Hawking radiation is. But I don't believe a black hole is mass. I believe it's tension in the Higgs string, it's negative energy density, and it is quantum gravity that is causing that black hole. And I think it starts a baby universe. And I think as that baby universe ages, then, you know, and we know time stopped on the parent side, when that space-time meshes up with, you know, the same age as the rest of the parent universe, that's what dark energy is, and it passes out. So Jazz is absolutely right. My definition of what Hawking radiation is and the recording of it and the passage of time is very, very different. But because the spaces aren't contiguous, the space-time of the black hole and the space-time of the external parent universe space, that avoids all the, you know, second law of thermodynamics and all that problem, because they're contained, they're separate systems. But anyway, yeah. So, but Lewis, you asked about what do I think is going on? Well, I think here's where it gets really spiritual. Yeah. Here's where it gets really spiritual, right? Because if something has an end, you can think of where eventually black holes will stop forming, right? And stars, they'll just become neutron stars or whatever. And if black holes stop forming, then the universe is going to spread out in space, and the universes will eventually catch up. And then the universe, the last place you could end up is the first black hole. And if the first black hole, if there's one consciousness on it, right, then that could be heaven. That could be the origin, the creator of the universe, that last black hole. And if we can get to that black hole, right, I mean, that could be, you know, what we think of in religion as heaven. And the one way that you could interpret this, that I do, at least in the podcast episode, is that if you like connect, right, with the creator of the universe, right, you create information, like a special, unique relationship with the creator of the universe, right? If information cannot be destroyed, and you're the only person carrying the information that is that connection that between you and the creator of the universe, then it's plausible that the universe can't destroy you if you're the only one with that. So in some ways, if, you know, I think that the microwave background radiation, like you're talking about the event horizon, scientists think that there's a huge sort of firewall inferno on the inside of an event horizon, right? And so as that space kind of elbows out and pushes out, when that black hole evaporates, if your energy is still on that black hole, and if you say you don't have any information that isn't encoded somewhere else, there is nothing that says you can't be destroyed or that you can't burn if that information is captured somewhere else. So in some ways, there's a plausible argument that if there's a hell, right, then it's around the black hole that we're on. And I think when we look at the cosmic microwave background, I think what we're hearing is the firewall. Because if it was the cosmic microwave background, then I would think it would be homogeneous, because when everything inflated by the, you know, according to the weak nuclear force and all that kind of stuff at the inception of the universe, the cosmic microwave background should probably be uniform, right? But it's not. And so I think that's essentially the flames of the firewall that we're hearing when we hear the cosmic microwave background. And I think if it's possible, like from a religious perspective, if you don't create some unique information between the creator and yourself, then destroying you doesn't disturb the law of conservation of information, because you're just redundant. But if you have a unique relationship, if you have a unique connection with the source, with the first black hole, with the creator, then it's possible that the universe can't destroy you. You end up on the very first black hole. And at least under this sort of sonic gravity theory of everything, it's plausible that it describes a geometry of the universe that where heaven or hell or what have you could exist. And if every human being or every civilization talks about a higher power, it's possible that it's because it's in our DNA. And if it's in our DNA, then it's possible that if there was one place where the origin, the first universe ever was, then that DNA would necessarily be in us. And I'm just saying it's plausible.
All right, so we have a lot. We have a lot to dig into here.
Quick, based on that, it sounds like we're closer to hell than heaven.
Yeah, no, it sounded to me like if you're boring or if you lack creativity, then you're doomed to hell, right?
Because you're redundant.
Yeah.
Because you're redundant. All right, so we're gonna
originality in that though. You never know.
You never know. We're gonna dig into this some more, but we got. I want to introduce our panelist right now, or two panelists actually. And so for those of you who are just joining us, let me go ahead and reset the room as well. We've got Bradley Voorhees here with us. He is from the Sonic Gravity podcast. He believes he has broken down and solved the God equation, or the theory of everything. And we're discussing his theory right now, his hypothesis right now. So we're going to continue to move into that. I had like a bunch of other stuff to talk about for the second hour, but I don't think we're getting to any of that. I think we got a whole lot to talk about right here. But I'm going to go ahead and bring in the one and only Carl Vibe. Carl is a full-time content creator. He's recently launched his new show, Carl Vibe, on YouTube to investigate the mystical aspects of reality and consciousness. And there was one person who I thought of immediately when I had brought Bradley on, and it is the Carl Vibe. Carl, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks so much, Michael, for having me. Brad, this has been awesome so far. I love hearing everything you've been unfolding. It's just really cool, and I'm vibing with all of it so far. It's really awesome.
Fantastic.
You and me on the surface of that black hole, brother.
That's right. I have a ton of questions.
On a 2D hologram that we can only see portions of when it spins through a spiral.
We've also got with us today the Dolphin Emperor. He is a writer for The Debrief and a special guest of the show. Thank you so much, as always, for being with us, Jazz Shaw.
Always a pleasure. And boy, this may be a short one, but love being here because this has really been a ride so far.
I feel like Jazz has some things to say, so we'll give Jazz that opportunity in just a moment. And we've also got Artemis Prime, who is going to share with us today the results of our poll. Could you share what the poll was and the results, Artemis?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, definitely really good topic today. Mind's blown. The poll today was, is Bradley a madman? 21% said yes. A genius? 12% said yes. Or only space-time will tell? 67% said that answer.
So we are existing in the superposition of possibilities with Brad here today on whether or not he is a genius or a madman, or both.
Both, maybe. Isn't everybody though?
To an extent, absolutely.
Yeah, everybody's got a superpower. You know, everybody's got one. So
yeah. And
I just started this like thinking about quantum physics like 3 months ago. So I could be
Yeah,
wrong.
that's crazy.
I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong. But to me, all the puzzle pieces fit. And so, I mean, when you look at if you look at the geometry of that hoop and you just kind of do the math, that's the exact proportion of dark matter to observable matter. And so just to me, it's just kind of hard to get around that. It also accounts for the singularity business. It accounts for infinite energy. It just, I could be totally wrong. I mean, Jazz could be totally right. And I think time's going to tell, because people are going to look at it and go, yeah, maybe that's right. Then, I mean, I don't have to prove it to anybody. And if they don't think it's right, then that's okay with me too.
Absolutely. So I want to dig more into this, but I'd love to get Carl and Jazz's opinions. You guys have been listening for a while. I know Jazz had a specific question about Hawking radiation. Is there something you wanted to elaborate on that, Jazz?
Well, yeah, that's one of a number of things, I guess. I will just say, first of all, that, I was initially sitting there and listening to the guests, and I was like, wow, this is a guy with a master's in civic engineering, and he's talking about all of this stuff. And then I stopped and realized, before you even open your mouth, you should recognize that I majored in electrical engineering, and I'm the guy that came up with the dolphin UFO theory. So what the hell do I know, right? So everybody's
Time will tell, man.
But just for the record, because it kept coming up so often, and it's just been one of my fascinations for a long time. Just to get this out in the open, Hawking radiation is based on one of the principles of quantum physics, which says that in a vacuum, there is a constant, never-ending stream of paired particles that emerge from the vacuum, from nothing, basically. And they collide with each other and they disappear and they go back to wherever they come from. And at the surface of a black hole, Hawking postulated that there was a point where the gravity was great enough on one side that instead of the two particles disappearing, that one of them would get sucked into the black hole while the other one would have enough inertia to radiate out away from the black hole. And that was how we would be able to detect Hawking radiation. It's the same principle of how zero-point energy would work. Zero-point energy is based entirely on this. And if we could ever learn how to stop those paired particles from destroying each other and going back into whatever void they came from, that you'd have an unlimited energy source. So that's how Hawking radiation works. It has nothing to do with temperature. It has nothing to do with anything that was being discussed here. That's how Hawking radiation works. And I wanted to get that off my chest because, I actually have read enough. I'm not a smart person. I know just enough to be dangerous, but the definitions being tossed around on the show about Hawking radiation, that's not how that works. Not even remotely. So that I just initially, I wanted to get that off my chest. I'm not saying I'm any smarter than the guest. Not at all. I'm not a quantum physicist. I do know a couple. And while you guys were doing it in the first 15 minutes of the show, I texted one of them and I said, hey, can you tune into this for a minute? And she lasted about 5 minutes and texted me back and was like, I'm out. So I don't know, so again, I'm not a genius, but yeah, I just, the Hawking radiation thing was just a pet peeve of mine through the discussion, among other things. But that's why I put in the super chat and why I wanted to bring that up early and maybe get some commentary, because that's how Hawking radiation actually works.
Well, I think that what is coming out of because the subject of the problem with the law of conservation of information was tracking that Hawking radiation, right? That's what it was.
Loss of information means that anything that goes into the black hole and can never come out again there is a concept that every bit of energy and every bit of matter in the universe has to eventually be trackable. And in theory, you could trace it all the way back to where it came from. And black holes seem to violate the law of being able to track information forever, because if information disappears forever, well, then one of our basic precepts of physics is faulty. But from some of the stuff you were going into, we're not actually even having this conversation and broadcasting it right now, because based on a number of things that were discussed tonight, none of our basic understanding of physics even works. So this is probably all just imaginary, and we're living on the surface of a black hole. We're just imagining all of this. So it's nice to meet all of you ghosts.
Well,
It's a simulation.
I think, there's a chance. I mean, there's a good chance that this isn't right. But I think that what evaporates a black hole is the abatement of the stress on the Higgs string, which is creating that gravity. And I think, and if you look at, sort of the geometry of the, the circle and the Higgs string pulling particles forward and backward in time, I think it makes sense that what is abating the tension in the Higgs string, which is causing the black hole, the gravity, is the passage of time. And so that's why I think the passage of time is what is coming out of the black hole, which is being recorded by the hologram and essentially our consciousness. And I think as the time moves, and I could be wrong, but I think
Brad, can you tell us what a hologram means? Because I'm not sure what you mean by recorded by the hologram.
Okay, so Gerard Touf went round and round, right, and proved that with Hawking, and proved that information could be recorded on a holographic surface, on a 2D holographic surface, that would encode essentially everything that happens inside in a 3D universe. So I'm pretty sure, I've only been looking at this for about 3 months, but I'm pretty sure that.
Yeah, I heard you say that you've taken up quantum physics in the last 3 months.
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated
true, right?
with the idea of holograms.
Or is that true?
So,
is that true, what I just said?
I'm not a quantum physicist. I'm
pretty sure it is.
Sound true, but I couldn't tell you. We should really get Deep Prasad on here. I could probably
Deep's not a trained quantum physicist either, Jazz.
Well, look,
not a quantum
I would
physicist.
Love to hear.
No,
I would love to hear, but I just think that to the extent that Hawking the emanation of Hawking radiation is what he postulated as what would essentially evaporate a black hole, right?
That's so I feel like we're going around in circles here with things that none of us fully understand. So what I'd love to do is kind of discuss what you mean, and I'm curious as well as what Jazz was asking. So when you say we are on the surface of a black hole and it's 2-dimensional, and we're experiencing 3-dimensional, so we're on Earth, we infer that the entire Milky Way galaxy is revolving around a black hole. How do you what do you mean when you say we're on the surface of a black hole? We have telescopes, we can see and infer that the black hole is at the center of the universe. How are we on the surface of it? What do you mean by that?
Okay, so just the whole premise of the whole theory of everything, right, or hypothesis of everything, perhaps, is that there's a black hole that and this isn't us looking at Sagittarius A star in the middle of our galaxy. I mean, that's a different universe, maybe, but there's a black hole that represents our universe in a parent universe, and so we're on the surface of that black hole, right, recording time that flows through it. And part of that hologram is encoding a 3D universe. And that is what we are perceiving from the surface of the black hole. Your brain doesn't directly interact, say your consciousness doesn't directly interact with the environment, right? Your brain sits essentially in a dark cave, right? And all it does is receive stimulation from your senses. And so in that way, I think you can think of, I mean, in the same way that like you dream, right? You think you're running, but you're not running. You know, it's like our consciousness receives information, and that's what we perceive as reality. And so I think that if we're sitting on the surface of a black hole, if we're energy on the surface of a black hole, and we're connected to this part of this hologram, right, which is encoding a 3D universe, and that's what we're perceiving, then like we are viewing the 3D universe all around us, and it is what is on the surface of this black hole. So, I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like you're peering in, you know, from the outside, but your consciousness is really sort of perceiving it as it's on the inside. Does that make sense?
Well, it's interesting because that's something that Elon Musk talks about too, when he talks about the substrate of reality, and we are projections of a sort of substrate. When you think of, you know, mushrooms growing, right? There's the substrate in the ground that the mycelium grow through, but it is the fruiting body that exists above the ground. Even though the majority of reality, 99.99999% of a mushroom's reality is lived underground, yet our perceptions above ground are this fruiting body. Carl, what do you think?
Boy, this is like such a huge topic. I have questions about the formula, but also about like if everything is technically, if we're writing on a holographic two-dimensional surface of a black hole, then our entire perceptions ultimately is just this. It can be just mowing the backyard, and that's what writing the surface of a black hole is. And that's fascinating to me, that it all quantifies into just a very normal everyday sort of experience, and how that occurs. But so does that mean that it's if it's just an energetic experience, does that mean it's a psychic experience? Is it all a sort of energetic meditation? I mean, we like to make it physical, but is it actually an illusion that it's physical, and it's actually a non-physical reality that we're perceiving as physical one?
Well, I think it's plausible that you and me are just, you know, vibrating energy on the surface of a black hole. And I think to the extent that the interaction with the hologram and the way, your energy runs on this hologram, I don't have your expertise, but I think to the extent that we are experiencing the coding and the passage of time and how that changes the hologram, which I think goes into our memories and goes into our DNA, and that's how we are the conservation of information. I think that, you know, all those things are kind of possible, because I mean, if your energy and your essentially your perception of reality is a 3D space coded on this hologram, that's where you're getting your info. I think that's room for a lot of different perspectives, you know? I mean, I don't think anybody can say, oh, that's not right, or that doesn't make sense. I think, you know, you got to just, you know, you see what you see.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Reality is perception.
I had a question. So, I mean, I'm reading your bio, and so just to add a little bit of context to who you are, Bradley, you were a retired military officer. What did you do in the military?
I was a combat engineer officer, and then the Army sent me to law school, and I became a JAG, and then I retired in 2013.
And then you also says you're an engineer and a lawyer as well.
Yeah, the Army sent me to law school, and I was an engineer before I entered the Army.
What kind of things were you working on as an engineer?
Just mostly construction, troop leadership, and that kind of stuff. When I got into law, one of the things, this isn't the first time that I've like done crazy things. Like I figured out essentially how to track and kill terrorists with their pattern of life when I was in Afghanistan after a guy killed my pal, and then, you know, I went to work at the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I invented an algorithm that peels up fraud networks and bulk transaction data. So I'm always doing kind of crazy things sometimes.
Is this
a little bit offbeat question? Brad, and
That's
this
just
is
what I've been doing.
my wife was listening in, and the first thing she said was, "Your accent and mine sound almost identical." Are you by any chance from upstate New York?
No, I spent some time at Fort Drum, though.
Oh, okay.
I spent some time at Fort Drum, and that is cold. Let me tell you, you guys are hard people. We used to have to run outside at Fort Drum if it was 40 degrees below zero or warmer. I mean, that was brutal. I've never been poked in the eyes with icicles before. It was crazy.
Well, I was gonna say you got a Val Kilmer thing going, but the reason why I asked these is I just wanted to give everybody in the room and everybody listening a little perspective. Like, you're not an idiot, right? You're not just throwing things out there. It seems like you've crammed dark energy, all of these wacky physics into 3 months of work. So I guess my question is, what's next? Like, do you plan on taking this theory? Can you mathematically work it out? Can you present it in, say, a paper or in a way that a scientific institution would look at this and take it into a heavy consideration? So, because I love the theory. I think it's fun to think about. It's almost like a Galileo. Hey, take a look through the telescope. Let's see what we see. And it's a fun conversation. But like Michael said, I'm not a physicist. I'm not someone who's qualified to be able to determine whether or not these things that we're saying are accurate or inaccurate. But I am curious to know, like, what do you have any plans on making this theory something viable for people to really consider?
To be honest with you, I didn't even think that I was going to think anything up like this.
Right.
But it just made so much sense when you look at, I think the gravity of inertia is quantum gravity. It's the tension in the Higgs string. I just, because, as you move through time, you feel gravity. And when you think of that model of the black hole, you're talking about Planck lengths of time. So as you move through time, it tugs on you. You feel gravity. It just seemed like it all went together and it made perfect sense. And so, it was kind of an accident, right? It's a byproduct of essentially my mental illness, where when I get manic, my brain just starts cycling. And I was going after trying to determine the physics of essentially how to achieve resonance and push off the Higgs field so that we could fly TicTacs and be massless. And so, I did several episodes on that. But if you look at my earlier episodes, I was talking about, as a podcaster, I was talking about the physics of leadership, overcoming imposter syndrome, negotiation supremacy, different stuff that is just like totally random. The thing is that I have this character flaw that when I don't understand something, it just really bothers me. And so I need to just kind of get after it. And that's why this is a complex subject, these flying TicTacs. And it took me like 3 months to unpack that a little bit. And so my objective is not to convince the world of anything. And what's going to happen is that I don't have to prove this. I'm telling people what I think the answer to the test is. And if they believe it, cool. If they don't, that's cool too. But if it's right, then, people are going to use it because they're going to be like, you know what? That is the truth about dark matter and dark energy.
But does that truth lead to, say, a breakthrough in technology?
Yeah.
In what ways?
If you're, if we realize that, say, that there's DNA in energy, and so we could put a ton of research, because like if the DNA of the universe is still communicated, in a Big Bang, and it still exists, if we can come up with the DNA of energy, then, think of what, like, you could beam people places, or, you could certainly communicate, quantum computing, the energy of quantum computing, and that would be, to me, I think that would be, crazy. And if you, check out what I've been doing on UFOs and stuff, you're talking about massless flight. And Jazz, I talk a little bit about a lot about 0-point energy, and essentially by disassociating from the Higgs field, you create a mass hole, which the weak nuclear force will try really hard to push mass into that mass hole. And depending on, how you manipulate that field, you could get the universe, you could turn yourself massless and maybe get the universe to push you around super duper fast. And
So is this what it was? Was it the UAP phenomenon that really kicked you into gear when it came to digging into this? I mean, I saw some of your equations on Twitter, and I was like, is this for real? Like, are these real equations? Like, how did you go from exploring TicTacs and being an engineer and a lawyer to like breaking into, running these equations in such a short period of time? I mean, it's quite staggering.
In 3 months.
It's all about disassociating the Higgs field. That's what I was like really focusing on when I was looking at the UAPs and all that stuff. And so I was thinking about like the oscillation, and notice the Higgs string doesn't oscillate. And I was thinking about all those other particles oscillating through time, because, if we're talking about how they oscillate across Planck times, the reason that Einstein's equation didn't work, I'm pretty sure, is because the mass wasn't there. He didn't know about dark matter. And if you kind of think of all the matter spinning around on that 4 Planck time, in the diameter of 4 Planck times, and so pi times the diameter is a circle. And so if you smear all the matter all around that circle, like evenly, and you're only seeing the 2 Planck lengths where it crosses the hologram, then all the math works out. And you get dark matter exists 5.2 times more amount than all observable matter. And if that's the case all across the universe, then, I mean, I got that part right. And I mean, so it's disprovable. Somebody could say, "Oh no, this doesn't work," and then I'd be like, "Okay, it doesn't work." But when you start talking about punching the core of a star through space-time, and there's no curvature of the universe, it becomes a singularity because you're dividing that term by a G factor, and so it seems to work that way too, and it seems to explain quantum teleportation too. And maybe I'm wrong, but it kind of looks like it checks all the boxes, which is, and if people can find problems with it, hey, that's cool.
Because I think that's good. I appreciate that, because you're inviting people to poke holes in this, and you're trying to get feedback. And I think that's important. And I think that no discovery or idea that has been truly profound in the world has ever been met with pure joy and appreciation from those around who have an understanding of other physics, right? We talk about this all the time. Luis and I, it's a great analogy. It's like the first light bulb was not created by a candle maker, right? We have most of our geniuses throughout time have been madmen who have been willing to take serious pressure. Now, that doesn't mean they were always right. Generally, 99% of the time they were wrong, but that 1% of the time that they were right made a big fucking difference.
And you know what? If I'm wrong and if I look stupid to everybody, who gives a shit? I mean,
right.
I don't give a shit. Like, this doesn't hurt my feelings if somebody thinks that I'm wrong, but it's just like.
But I think it's but my point is fascinating to think about.
I'm the guy who came up with the dolphin theory. You and I are in the same boat.
I mean, like, it doesn't hurt my feelings. Somebody doesn't agree, then hey, that's cool. Back. Then tell me what it is. I mean, I just wanted to share it.
Yeah.
Brad, I got to. Oh, go ahead, Kristin. Yeah.
Luis is like.
I don't think we meant to put him on. I think I accidentally threw him on the screen. He's like,
might as well make a face. That's what if always fall back on that.
What do you got, Carl?
So I got a question about the equation and how it kind of relates in the actual reality and the way we perceive it. So if everything in the equation ultimately comes back to that zero, or that infinite void that consumes everything, you can almost visualize that zero in the equation as the black hole in a way, consuming everything and not letting anything escape that surface tension of the zero. But things still do, in an illusory way, they escape this event horizon. And ultimately, as a zero consumes everything into that void, the zero would enfold in on itself, and there would be a pinpoint that would go through the center of that. It would enfold on itself like I don't know. Instead of thinking of it like a disc, I'm spinning on itself. I'm thinking of it like a torus, like a rotating energy donut or something. And that's what Anyway, go ahead.
No, that's exactly okay. So if you take I'm gonna try to do it with my finger. So if you take all the matter in the universe and you smear it on this circle, right, that's 4 Planck lengths across, and then you multiply it by pi times 4, you get 12.566 or something like that. 12.566. That's all the matter in the universe, okay, is smeared along that 12.566 donut. Now that only intersects our hologram in essentially twice, in 2 1-tick spots, plus a little bit extra because it's curved. And so if you do the ratio of 2 and a little extra to 12.66, you get 6.25. But if you do 10.5 and you divide 2 and some change into that, you get 5.25, which is exactly the ratio, measured ratio of dark matter to matter.
So let me ask this.
And that's a fact. Like there's no discussion.
That if we could, what would we see if we could just see beyond those 2 ticks, but if we could see the whole circle, the entire traveling of this matter? Like what would we see?
We would see, well, I think we'd see exactly the same thing, but it would be 6.25 times heavier, 6.25 times more massive.
So and that's your explanation for dark matter, because we don't see it. That's where it is. That it has mass. It is real. It doesn't exist on our plane of observability.
Yeah, we can't interact with it. So because it's above the hologram or below the hologram, that mass is still there. It still has gravity. And that's the mass we need essentially in the problem you're talking about. Like, why doesn't the galaxy fly apart? Because the observable mass doesn't seem to be enough to hold it together. And you're right. But there is dark matter, which is the matter that's kind of spinning around outside of the hologram, that if you do the math on the 12 pi and the ratio of the 2 Planck lengths, you get the exact ratio that's measured in astronomy. They think, oh, well, there's 5.25 times more matter than the dark matter than matter. And I'm just saying it's not just like particles somewhere else. I'm saying it's us. It's us, but we're just smeared across 4 Planck lengths of time, and we can only see 18. We can only interact with 18% of it at once. So when it comes to Occam's razor,
sorry, when you say it's us, what do you mean by that?
The matter is our matter.
What do you mean? What do you mean it's our matter?
Oh, okay. Well, so you're looking at you in 1 Planck length of time, right?
Okay.
Now you slide as time passes, right? You're sliding into the future 1 tick. Okay. Now all the matter that was you, okay, is in the past, and you're in the next tick of time. And so now that matter in that next tick of time is the matter that was 1 tick in the future. And the Higgs field is grabbing that stuff from the past and slinging it back around. And so in some ways, it's kind of like the tank tread, right? And so as you slide to the next tick, you're seeing the matter that was 1 tick in the future.
It's a tank tread that folds in on itself.
Yeah. Does that make sense? I mean,
it's almost
like
fascinating.
It's almost like certainly fascinating.
Polarity of the planet, and everything has the positive pole and the negative pole, and everything cycles in and out through the core, almost even of the Earth, and you see that reflectively in everything, like all the way out. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think to the extent you're talking about, you're looking at a dynamic. You're not at rest. There's nothing that's at rest about us. We're moving through time, tick, Planck length time, tick by tick by tick, and we know from particle motion and oscillation that those particles at the quantum level are spinning around. So if you're in one tick of time, it's irrational to think that you're experiencing all of your matter in that single tick, because it oscillates wider than one tick. And so if your consciousness is only in one tick, then essentially 82% of your matter is not in that tick with you, because it's oscillating,
Like a lot of
it might be worth noting that there are still a substantial number of astrophysicists, and because it's one of my pet hobbies that I follow, who aren't even sure that dark matter is real, and believe that it could be a mathematical error because of our inability to measure something like the total mass of the universe with our telescopes from this one tiny little planet, and being unable to minutely grasp the distance between things and the mass of things. We don't even know what the mass of the sun is. We don't really even know what the mass of the Earth is. We have estimates. But if you allow for a margin of error, how much you might be wrong by, let's say the Earth's a little less massive or a little more than we think it is, or the sun is, and then you multiply that by the trillions and trillions and trillions of stars and planets and all the junk in between them, that there's a lot of guessing going on out there. So it's not really a complete consensus yet that dark matter is even real. We may just have the math wrong. Just throwing that out there. That is one.
I mean, that's the whole point, right? And like when you look at quantum mechanics and you talk to one astrophysicist and then you talk to another one, you can get a completely different interpretation of the mathematics. And so oftentimes I'm like, how important is it for a mathematician or an astrophysicist to have elegant math versus a true picture of reality? I feel like so often it's more about this hunt for elegant math than it is for the true nature of reality. And that's, again, I'm not an astrophysicist. I'm not somebody, right?
Neither am I.
Right. I'm so far out of my depth here, and I just want to be so super clear about that. But these concepts are so fascinating. And the fact that the best astrophysicist on the planet could be so off whack or so out of touch with the true nature of reality just makes me remember we should, it's like, why shouldn't we take any, all of these possibilities in consideration? This is the thing. Okay. This is part of the reason I wanted Bradley on here today, because it pisses me off. Mainstream academia is so egotistical in their ability to shun all fringe scientists and all thinkers that are not within the constructs of that bureaucracy. And it just, I can't explain to you guys how angry it makes me. And the fact that they can all have such different conclusions to a similar problem, and then they could turn on this show, Jazz, like your friend, and then turn it off because, oh, I'm too fucking smart for this. Like, that pisses me off to no end. Okay, I got it off my chest.
No, I mean, if you think about it,
hey, feel free, man.
I mean, if you think about it, though, it makes perfect sense, right? I mean, like, how bad would you feel if you dedicated your whole life to this and your education, and then some idiot came up and, like, just in a weekend figured it out? You know what I mean? Like, that would just be
devastating.
But I'll tell you what, Einstein was a patent clerk. I'm a patent attorney. So I think there's a connection there. I really do. I'm like a licensed patent attorney.
Also, I mean, I don't think it did. How long did it take Einstein to come up with E = MC²? Wasn't it like a bolt of lightning for him? He was just like, oh, shit was like sitting on a park bench, and all of a sudden it just clicked.
Yeah, and you know what? Well, sort of, and
Sort
so yeah, I just want to speak to that because he literally.
Sorry, I was just being stupid. I was like, no, it was when an apple fell on his head.
Oh, you're going straight Newtonian. You're going straight
right,
Newtonian on
right
me,
to
Kristin.
Yeah.
So he actually said, Einstein said that it's not that he was so smart, it's that he sat in the question longer, right? And so yes, Luis, you're right, it was a bolt of lightning, but it was a bolt of lightning that hit him after sitting in the question forever, as long as he couldn't think of anything else.
And Einstein, just for the record, revised relativity 3 times over the course of his career. The initial premise, he stuck with that, and it's mostly been proven. But he had his initial premise, he had a second one, and before his death, he had a third one where he was like, okay, I got that part wrong.
Right.
You know, so it was a continual learning process, and he did work as a patent clerk, but he worked in universities, he worked with scientists, and he went on and just kept digging and digging. And I don't want to say this I'm not even going to say it. I won't say what I was going to say.
Oh, go ahead. It won't hurt my feelings.
He didn't do it in 3 months. Okay. He wasn't a patent clerk in August. And then in November, he was like, oh, wait, I figured out space-time. It didn't happen like that.
Right.
And he kept revising it over time. He kept publishing more and more papers. Some of them were greatly accepted, fantastic work. Some of them were challenged, and he defended them. Some were challenged, and he was like, oh, that's a good point, and now I need to revise my thing. And it was a long progress. So trying to pretend that Einstein just woke up one day and was like, oh, I need to sign off the patent for this toaster. Oh, wait, I've got space-time. That's not how it happened. Einstein was not an accident. He was a brilliant person. He didn't get everything right.
No. I wasn't.
He
trying
worked
to
at it for his entire life.
Wasn't trying to suggest it was an accident. I'm just saying, like the inspiration for it, I'm sure, came to him at the most inopportune time. Like it sometimes it just hits you, and then you can't write fast enough to get your ideas out on the paper.
Right.
So
no, Luis, you're absolutely. I agree with you. You're absolutely right. When he came up with the idea that gravity wasn't just a property of mass, he was like, wait a minute, it's space-time. It's all locked together. I think that was a moment of inspiration. Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And again,
that's
that's what he said. He said he sat in the question. Like you're right, Jazz. He'd been thinking about this his whole life. Like this had been gnawing at him and gnawing at him and gnawing at him. And and he was working towards answers, but it was, as you said, it was this moment where he was like, aha, but he's very specific about it. He said, I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Right. And so sometimes you have to think too that a theory or a new idea or a new approach to a new perspective, the whole point is to put it out there on the table and not say, I already know that this is correct and this proves that everybody's wrong, but it's to put it out there to say, what does everybody think of this? And that's kind of the way even like a scientist like Donald Hoffman approaches things. He wrote a whole book called The Case Against Reality. And I love that. He postulates that literally our experience of reality is like an illusion or a hologram, and that everything is just a user interface that we are perceiving, and what it is actually composed of, we don't know. But maybe Brad's right. Maybe it's the surface tension of a black hole trying to do a spin on its own conscious energy. So it
sounds like he's talking about what I was talking about, but the difference between me and Einstein is that he's a genius and I'm a little crazy. And I wasn't thinking about the question a lot. I was trying to unpack UFO stuff, and I just kind of fell on it. It just kind of assembled in my brain, and I thought, and then I looked at the equation, and then I was okay. Let me check and see what the real ratio is of dark matter, and I was like, wow, it's exact. How about that?
What do you mean? Can you speak to that a little bit? Because that's the thing that I'm trying to understand, because you are so new to this. I'm trying to understand how you've been able to unpack these equations and understand them, because you could give me the next 12 years and I don't think I would have, just hearing you speak, Bradley, like the way you pop off these numbers. I know your numbers. So my question is, where are you getting this information about dark matter? How do you know what you're saying? How do you know the base math that you're building your hypothesis on is correct?
Okay, so just we talked about the circle of oscillation of those particles, right? It's 4 Planck lengths in diameter. So the circle, that's the circumference of a circle that is 4 Planck lengths in diameter, is pi times diameter, right? So it's pi, which is 3.14 times 4, which comes out to 12.556.
Okay.
So now the only time we can see any of that matter, if you believe that we're sitting on the surface of a black hole, is when remember how we talked about quantum teleportation, when that BB hits the surface. That's the only time you can see. And the surfaces, it hits twice in a cycle, right? On one side and then the other. And they're only 1 Planck length thick. So it's 12.556 Planck lengths around, that's the trip around the circle. And 2 of those ticks are in the hologram. And so what I'm saying is that at any point in time, all you can see is essentially 2/12 or, of all the matter that exists there, right? Because you can only see the stuff that's in the hologram, and only 2 ticks worth are in the hologram. And the rest of the 12, essentially 10.55, is either in the future or in the past. It's either up or it's on the downside. And so if it's 10.55 that's dark, and if it's 2 that's real, if you divide 2 into 10.55, you get 5.25, which is the exact measured ratio, they think, of dark matter to real matter.
That's fucking wild.
And so if you want to get the energy of matter, of all matter, the reason it didn't work for Einstein, I think, in the whole spinning galaxy would fly apart thing, was because he didn't know to account for the dark matter, and he was just going by the visible matter. And so if it's spinning around like that in a circle, then that extra piece of the circle that's not inside the hologram, if you count that accounts for all the dark matter. And so 4 pi divided by the G factor, including the anomalous dipole moment, times the observable mass times c squared, is really what I think E equals mc squared was always supposed to be.
Brad, can I ask you a personal question?
Yeah, sure.
Do you think your bipolar disorder helps you with this math, or do you think it's a detractor? Like, do you think in solving this, do you think that I don't want to call it a disorder, it's just a mental I don't know how you want to phrase it.
That's fine.
I don't want to offend you, but like, do you think that helps in your thinking of this, or do you think it's possible that condition might be leading you in a direction that isn't right?
Well, when you think about like having a mental illness, right? Everybody sort of has a superpower, and everything comes with drawbacks, right? Mm-hmm. So when I'm manic, my brain is cycling 1,000,000 miles a second. And that's when I'm recalling all kinds of things that I learned from all kinds of, wherever. Like, my brain is just kind of buzzing. And if I wasn't manic and if I wasn't ADHD, then that might not happen. I might not have sort of the recall and, the ability to sort of process all that stuff and absorb other information. And so in some ways, I think it's a, it really helps. It helps me to, critically think. But on the other hand, it makes social shit kind of difficult. Like, there's a lot of people that are like, fuck, man, he's crazy. Like colleagues that I, was in the military with. There's lots of people that won't return emails or, comment on like social media, they decline to engage with me, and I can't blame them, you know, because when you have mental illnesses, right, like a lot of people, they just don't want to get any on them, you know, they just don't want to get entangled with unsavoriness, you know what I mean? They just don't want to deal with it. And like, you know, when you get low, you know, or when like your PTSD kicks in and you're like fucking freaking out because you think, you know, somebody's after you or this or that. Like, I mean, I have to check myself, man, because sometimes, you know, I'll be kind of in a bad place and then I'll fucking see the enemy everywhere. And, you know, it has a lot to do with, you know, Afghanistan and, you know, some of my other, you know, my mental illness and that kind of stuff. So I got to check myself, you know, I mean, I really need to, you know, watch myself.
Is there anyone that you can is there anyone that you can trust that you can bounce these ideas off of that actually does give you the time and the room to really sort of spread your legs with these thoughts and has the expertise to be like, Brad, yeah, that's a good way to go. I think that's a fun way to think. Or do you have someone to bounce these? Yeah, just simple question.
There's just, you know, if I tell somebody something, I can tell right away. They're like, oh man, he's fucking off his rocker. You know
but are they
mean?
saying that because they're not they're not digesting exactly what you mean?
Hard to say. I have a really hard time like with empathy. And so, you know, part of being a psychopath is it's really hard. You like have issues with boundaries and like.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. So,
are you familiar with the work of Dr. Hal Puthoff from the Stanford Research Institute, now who's with the To the Stars Academy? He's done a lot of physics research into dark energy and dark matter and the propulsion systems on UFOs and how it all relates to time travel and the same kind of stuff. Have you researched any of his work at all?
No, I'm extremely poorly read unless, like, if I'm just looking for something. Because, okay, so I have this critical thinking algorithm, right? And it's, I either know it, right? It's know thyself, right? So I either know it or I don't know it. And the art, I think, of critical thinking is knowing if you don't know something you need to know. And so, you know, in some ways, like, you know, when responding to Jazz about like all the minutia about Hawking radiation, I didn't really feel like I needed to know all that much about that to arrive at, you know, what is the equation for matter. And so I'm not particularly well read in areas that I didn't perceive as, you know, relevant to the thought that I was assembling. And so, but I think that if you know what you know, then you know everything that you don't know, because everything else is what you don't know. And so if you know what you know, and you know what you don't know, then I think you can know everything. And so that's, you know, I talk about that too in Critical Thinking 1, 2, and 3, is that's just kind of, you know, how I operate. And, you know, maybe that makes me blind to something. Maybe I am blind to some things that I needed to know to come up with the right answer. It's always a possibility. But the good news is that if it's right, like, people are going to use it, or they're going to be fumbling around with the wrong stuff, and somebody else is going to figure out something, you know, better or newer or whatever. So I think if it's right, then people, it's kind of like res ipsa loquitur, right? The thing speaks for itself. It's either right or it's not.
And even if it's only partially right, if it triggers a response to try and correct that, it could lead to something more correct or a clearer picture. I think that's a good idea.
Well, I think that's why it's so important to have conversations like this. You know, it's like so often, and this is what you were expecting, Bradley, when you know, we share this on Twitter, how much hate you were going to get. You know, having conversations outside of the mainstream, outside of, you know, in these kind of fringe areas allows people to think, you know, just think. And we don't know, you know, even every piece of the puzzle that astrophysicists know or believe they know, or the elegant math that they've understood to be a solution, there's another astrophysicist who will argue with that, and there's another one that will argue with that. And so we can spend so much time not looking at a specific part of a subject because they say, no, don't look there. There's nothing to see. And, and I think, Bradley, one of the things that you've done here is you've said, you know what, I'm not going to spend all my time on Hawking radiation because I don't think that's the part of the puzzle I need to solve. But at the same time, there could be an important piece in what traditional or mainstream mathematics understands about Hawking radiation that could help you in your theory. So I think just having these conversations and having dissenting viewpoints and having multiple perspectives pushes us to think more deeply about these things, and hopefully pushes brilliant people like you to hack away at what you believe and figure out, can I go deeper? Is there more here? Am I missing something?
Nobody has ever got me to think about my existing on the edge of a black hole. So that's a fun thought process.
Yeah.
Bad day.
Can I just say something that makes it even spookier is that the way that Brad's describing it in a weird way echoes a lot of these ancient mystical teachings that come out of the Far East, like teachers like Ramana Maharshi and a lot of ancient Buddhist teachings and stuff. If they didn't quite have the same verbiage that we use today, like calling it a hologram or a black hole, but if you go and read their writings and stuff like in the I Ching and do deep transcendental meditation, you kind of come to these weird same conclusions in an alternative way. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that there's a lot of ancient mystical teachings that actually support what Brad is saying in an interesting way. And a lot of modern scientists are starting to have to turn around and address that and where that's coming from. It's very interesting.
Like Creepy Pete says, sometimes you need to bring some wizards to the party.
Full circle, Lou.
Yep.
Full circle, bro. Isn't that the very beginning of the conversation we had tonight? Sometimes you need the prophets. Sometimes you need the wizards.
Indeed.
What an amazing show. What a collection of amazing people in this room. And I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Jazz, thank you for being somebody who comes in and says, you know what? Come on, man. Look at the science. We know some things. Don't forget to look at all the pieces of the puzzle. So I really appreciate that and respect that, Jazz. And for those of you who aren't following Jazz, he's so tired of all his normie Twitter followers. If you're hearing this show, you're not a normie. Make sure you go follow Jazz on Twitter because he's the man. Jazz, what a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Hey, anytime, man. And don't focus on me. Once again, focus on these guys. Support their channels. They're doing good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Jazz. I hope you enjoyed that vacation, sir.
I did.
Oh,
I
yeah.
caught the largest bass I've caught in 5 years. Yep.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
Do you eat bass,
Nice.
Jazz?
No, we do catch and release.
Okay. Oh, that's what I did. All right. All right. Well, we love you, buddy. We'll see you
Still
soon.
good though.
Take
Thanks,
care,
brother.
guys.
Ciao.
Bye.
Artemis Prime, thank you so much for always being right there to support the channel, to support the show, to be an amazing moderator,
Always.
and to spread your little butterfly wings. I see you doing big things out there and getting on other podcasts and building your little brand. So well done. I'm so proud of you.
We'll see. Don't worry, I'm still a lifer here.
All right. We love you, Artemis. Thank you for handling the poll today. We appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye. Carl Vibe, thank you so much for joining the show today. Again, when I knew Bradley was coming on, I said, "Who's the perfect person?"
Yeah,
to
I
have
was
this
thinking.
conversation?
My first thought for me was Carl Vibe. Second thought was like, where is Rather?
I reached out to Rather. Rather and Carl were like right there.
Yeah.
I feel like I could sit and talk over drinks with Brad for hours and hours about all this
I
stuff.
want to
For
see
sure.
Brad on
Do it,
Carl
man.
Vibe's channel.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I think that's a great
Let's all come over there one of
medium.
these times.
Yeah, dude,
let's-
that'd be sick. That would be sick.
I'm super down. If you're not following Carl Vibe, make sure you get over on his YouTube channel. I think I'll be over there on Saturday, right?
Yeah, Saturday. We haven't even picked a time yet. Let's figure it out.
Let's figure it out. Let's do it. Carl, what's your twiddle handle and twiddle? What's your twiddle?
It's all Carl Vibe now. Carl Vibe. If you want to go watch my more family stuff and less mystery stuff, it's Carl the Crusher. That's what we call it for families. But yeah, Carl Vibe for all this interesting philosophy and theories for sure.
Love it. Carl, what a pleasure. Love you, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mike.
Hey, it was nice meeting you.
Bradley, what a wonderful show. What a wonderful time to be with you. Thank you so much for joining the Singularity Lab. I haven't had a single guest who has said the word singularity as many times as you did during this show, and that's magical.
Yeah, you said the titular line of the show.
It's a pleasure. I'm now a fan. I'll be following your podcast. I'll be following your growth. I'd love to have you back on the show sometime. Maybe you can join us as a panelist here and there. We'd love that.
I'm just honored to be able to share space with all you beautiful people. And
hey, likewise, man. Likewise,
Yeah,
you are.
that was fun.
Yeah, you're a great guy, and just an amazing imagination, amazing intelligence. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to keep a close eye on your work, and I expect you to be back here and hang out with us soon.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
And I gotta tell you, I'm not a physicist. I get kind of diverse. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go any further like on this. I just hope it helps somebody else.
We'll see what happens, my brother. If you could do me a favor and tell people where they can find your podcast and how they can follow you on Twitter or social media, that would be dope.
Hey, thanks, Michael. My podcast is www.sonic-gravity.com. And I'm on Apple, I'm on Spotify, I'm everywhere. And Sonic Gravity, @SonicGravity1 is my Twitter, and just Facebook page, Sonic Gravity Podcast. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Superb. And even if it's not about, even if it's not about this topic, we'd love to have you back, man.
Yeah, and I'll come back. And man, I love talking about UFOs.
Excellent. All right.
Yeah, well, so do we. So do we.
Awesome. Amazing to have you, Brad, and have a wonderful day. And thank you for joining us.
You too, sir.
All right. Bye-bye. Woo! What a great show.
Yeah.
It was.
We have like a bunch of sober followers out there now because we didn't reset, and I heard that was the drinking game. We need to sneak up on them and like reset 12 times.
Well, it's a hard conversation to reset on.
It was.
You can't just stop in the middle of an explanation of living on the bubble of a fucking black hole. Like,
right. Yeah.
It's true.
Excuse me. We want to talk about how people should subscribe to this channel.
Yeah. We thought you guys were sick of it, but hey.
No, they love. No, it's the resetting of the room has become quite a cult classic around here.
It really do.
We do have to sketch up some merch that has reset.
Oh, definitely. Well, yeah. The merch is privately killing it because if you're part of the Patreon, you got a link to the merch already. The merch, if you don't want to be part of the Patreon, which is totally understandable, we get it. The merch will be available tomorrow for everyone. The link will be available. We're gonna announce it tomorrow live during the Unidentified Celebrity Review tomorrow, 4:00. We're also going to be debuting the Big Phone Home website. With the creator and gentleman who helped us, Mr. Ben Jenkins of Nito Creative, and he's also Ben from Ben and Joe on the UFO Garage podcast. So he had a huge hand in helping put this together. So we're going to be answering questions about the Big Phone Home. We're going to be revealing merch. It's going to be a fun day tomorrow. And then for the second half of the hour, we're going to review Mirage Men. Now, I know everybody's like, oh, that movie's been out for years. Michael's never seen it. Stephen Greenstreet just saw it. He's also going to be joining us for the review. And I'm pretty sure UFO Jane will be there. I haven't asked her officially yet, but she's always there on Wednesdays. So chances are you'll see her face around there too.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're going to go watch it tonight. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, do so now. Also click the bell. And if you haven't subscribed to the Unidentified Celebrity Review, make sure you go over there and do that. We love you guys. What an amazing group of in the Chatterverse today. You guys have been spectacular. So thank you for being there. Thank you for loving me. Kill the turkey. All right. That's
Kill
it.
the
That's not
turkey?
it. Yeah. Do you watch Bob's Burgers?
Man, I watched the first 2 seasons, maybe 3, and I loved it. And for some reason, I stopped watching
You
it.
stopped watching
You want
it?
to talk about a good show? Just real quick.
Yeah.
You guys should definitely check it out. It's a great
Ragnarok?
couple show.
What?
No,
Oh, what?
well, Ragnarok's fun, but nah, it's not for everyone.
What?
The White Lotus on HBO.
We are watching it.
Yeah,
Dude.
I want to
Good.
watch the last one again.
So
We just-
good.
We watched.
I
we watched
mean,
the last.
working
We watched
in the
the
service
Yeah, we
industry
watch Sundays.
for almost 20 years.
same, bro.
I relate to every single person working in that hotel.
I resemble all those remarks.
Yep. Yep. It's a fun show. It's a fun show. It's a fun show. I highly recommend checking it out.
It is really good. I think we watched the newest episode last night. It's fucking amazing.
Yeah, I just watched it right before we came on here. Yeah, it was really good. All right.
All right.
Was that
Well,
it?
that's it. That's
All right.
it.
Outro
Love you
time.
guys. Mwah.
Peace.